The Tides of Torment units are here, let's smash them into each other and some of the older units and see what they can do. Let's kick it off with some lower end infantry, the Bearmen Marauders versus the Ships Company. So Norska versus High Elf new units. This one is maybe a little bit predictable. Ships Company are a tier 1 unit while Marauder Bearmen are a tier 2. But let's just freeze here because we can notice something a little interesting here. You notice anything strange about these 3 elves here? What do you see? Anything? They've got human ears! Maybe elves are finally evolving to get rid of their stupid ears and become just straight up humans, because they don't want to be elves anymore, and I don't blame them. Alright, 30 seconds in, we've got an elf joke down, let's keep going. Obviously, that's just a visual bug that will be fixed for release, but these 2 units, very similar, both kind of defensive units, both got the shields. The Bearmen are a very tanky unit, they've got more health than regular Chaos Marauders, they've got the melee defense, plus they have rage, so they're going to get stronger as this fight wears on. And we can see the Bearmen slowly but surely pulling ahead as the Ships Company's health falls. So Ships Company come along as a decent low-tier chaffy unit, but I feel like they're not really going to replace Spearmen. This guy looking for a duel. The guy he's trying to fight doesn't seem to give a shit. Oh, his mate's died. I'm kind of curious if he's going to get that duel he's looking for. He's still looking at him. He's still attacking him. Oh, his mate's come along. He'll duel him. Oh, he's turned around now. The duel's on. Let's see if he can kill anyone. This one shipman. Come on, boy. Do it like Harold. Kill them all. Christ. I hope nobody got that joke. Anyway, this elf has failed miserably, poor lad, and that's pretty much going to sum up the Ships Company versus the Bearmen Marauders, dead behind the eyes. Ships Company, fine as a chaffy unit, they were just facing a more expensive, stronger unit here. I did also try the Bearmen against some similar type and price of units like the Plague Monks, but the Bearmen got fairly badly beaten up by the Plague Monks. The Plague Monks still had a fair bit of their health after they were done, and you know, Plague Monks aren't even that good, so that was a little disappointing. And I did try them against Jade Warriors, who are a little cheaper than them, and they did beat them, but kind of only just. They were very beaten up at the end of it. And for one final test with the Bearmen, I put them against the new Devotees of Slaanesh. These are kind of a similar unit, they're sort of in the tanky vein, but a little more damage dealer with a bigger weapon strength and the bonus versus infantry. They are also a fair bit more expensive than the Bearmen, so it would be very surprising if they lost here. And we can see the Devotees pulling ahead pretty quick. So Bearmen, not too bad, they're just kind of more tanky Chaos Marauders. I feel like at a similar price point though, they're probably eclipsed by Berserkers. So the Devotees, they beat up the Bearmen. How will they fare against something a bit tougher though? Let's try Saurus with shields. So Devotees don't have a ton of armor, but they do have a 20% physical resistance, so that's going to help them in a fight like this, especially against Saurus with their big weapon strength. And eventually the Devotees do get it done pretty quickly, routing the Saurus without losing too much of their health. They still got about half health. They are slightly more expensive, so it's slightly expected, but how about a tougher challenge then? Bloodletters. These are of course a big damage dealer. They've got magical attacks, which is going to take away the physical resistance of the Devotees. And also the Devotees do have an ability that makes them stronger and more damaging the longer they fight for, so they kind of want to benefit from a prolonged fight. This kind of fight where they're getting murdered pretty quickly and taking a lot of damage pretty quickly isn't good for them. They need a more prolonged fight, and that's going to show here as they are going to lose to the Bloodletters. Although only just they put up a good fight, they've nearly beaten some of them. But overall, Devotees, a decent mid-tier unit, just maybe not against demons when they lose their physical resistance. How about the new Blades of Hoeth, the regiment of renowned Homasters of Sordith? Let's throw them in the deep end against one of the toughest infantries in the game, the Nurgle Chosen Great Weapons. They do a lot of damage and they're pretty damn tanky themselves, so we'll see if the Homasters can get through them. They're putting out a lot of damage very quickly here though on the charge. Despite being weakened by the poison, they're still getting it done pretty well so far. And the unique thing about these Swordmasters over the regular ones is that they have Guardian, which gives physical resistance to lords and heroes, but of course that isn't helping them here. And eventually these Homasters are going to get it done, beating the crap out of these Chosen even with half of their health left. So pretty damn impressive. They are a little more expensive than the Chosen. I think they're about 1600. How about the Hellforge Host then? Another very dangerous elite tier unit. They are only about 100 cheaper than the Homasters, so we'll see how they fare. It's pretty even so far, both taking tons of damage. The Blades of Hoeth maybe done a little bit more though. Can they finish the job? They are taking away the physical resistance of the Bloodletters with their magical attacks, so that's pretty huge for them, and it looks like they are starting to pull ahead quite a lot, and they are going to do it. They're going to put away the Hellforged Host again pretty comfortably. About a third of their health left, so still juice in the tank to do some more work. Are they the new best infantry in the game? Well, let's ask one final opponent, the Bloodwake Berserkers. These are the most expensive infantry, maybe in the game, but I don't know. They're more expensive than the Homasters, though, and they are knocking the Homasters all over the place. Elves are literally flying everywhere. You love to see it. You love to see it. And not even looking at the health bars, I think we can tell how this one's going. The elves are just flying around. There's a lot of them dead on the floor. There's another one. It's like watching toddlers try to fight grown men. So I think we can see how this one's going. It's not too bad though. The Homemasters aren't getting absolutely destroyed. They are putting some fair damage back on the Bloodwake Berserkers, but they're not quite up to this standard, but still a very strong new unit for the High Elves, allowing them to compete in the top tier of infantry. Very nice. On from infantry then, how about monstrous infantry? Snake Men, first of all, I wanted to see how well they could do against one of the toughest frontline units in the game. They are an anti-infantry damage dealer, so let's see if they can take down one of the toughest infantries going, the Iron Breakers. And as you may have noticed there, Champions of Slaanesh, very quick on their slithery parts. Is there a proper name for a snake body? I don't know. Regardless, they're knocking dwarves all over the place. They've messed up the formation already. The blasting charges didn't do a lot to these, as they generally don't to monstrous infantry. But the Champions of Slaanesh, they've got armor piercing. They've got a bonus versus infantry, so this is their preferred target. They do have devastating flanker, which means they really want to flank stuff ideally. But in this situation, obviously we're not doing that. So they are going to be underperforming a bit, but not really that badly, because it's only going to take them about 2 minutes to get through the Iron Breakers and start wavering them, so that is pretty impressive, I think. So if it only takes 2 minutes to get through the toughest infantry front line, then it's probably way less for most other infantries. A very nasty frontline killer, and even more dangerous if you get them on the flank. But I figured that, hey, Iron Breakers are a kind of low damage output unit, so they're not really giving much damage back to the champions. Let's try them against something that will give them damage back, those Chosen of Nurgle again. I've actually got 3 units of the Great Weapon version and then 3 units of the normal Chosen non-armor piercing version, so we'll see if there's a difference between the fights. It's looking pretty even over this side against the Great Weapons, both taking a fair amount of damage. I do think the Champions are one of the coolest new units, just based on the fact that they're a Snake Man with 4 arms and big damage dealer. And you know, Slaanesh has a lot of good damage dealers, but yeah, just cool Snake Man vibes. But eventually though, we are going to find the Champions lose to the Great Weapon Chosen. So pretty much a glass cannon unit, as you might expect. They're great at dealing out damage, but not so great at taking it back. And this is confirmed even more by the same case against the non-armor piercing Chosen. The Champions with only 60 armor, not the toughest in the world, so you do want to look for those flanks and get that devastating flanker going, but otherwise still a very dangerous infantry killer. How about one little test with the Oceanids, the High Elf's new monstrous infantry? We'll try them against Stone Trolls and see how they fare. They're not really up to this sort of challenge. They're more of a defensive unit. They have a lot of melee defense, only 24 melee attack. Do have a bonus versus infantry, which means they need to fight infantry. Fighting other monstrous infantry like this, they're just not going to be able to dish out enough damage. They do have a physical resistance, but no armor. But overall, quite a unique unit, not just visually, but with the way they work as well. Most monstrous infantry are damage dealers or anti-large damage dealers. So to be a more defensive monstrous infantry is a little bit rarer. There's only maybe the Treekin, maybe the Crabs as well, but they're actually going to fare okay here against the Stone Trolls. Most of them losing by a fair bit. These two units do cost the same amount as well. They have won one of the fights here somehow by a fair bit. I'm not sure what's happened there. Maybe a bit of an anomaly. This one they're losing really badly, so a bit all over the place, but still a good frontline unit to mix in with your infantry perhaps. Alright, let's get to what you've all really come here to see. Tits on snakes that are really randomly white. So there's a bit of a visual bug in this build at the moment where you can see when I zoom in, they go really white. And it's like somebody turns on a light switch when I get the camera near them. So do pardon that. They're not supposed to be bright white. You can see how they're supposed to be in the back rows. But let's put these against one of the top anti-large cavs. First of all, the Blood Knights, both of them taking a good bit of damage straight out the gate. The Pleasure Seekers are very quick at 100 speed and have fairly balanced damage output and defenses. They got 60 armor piercing damage, 55 melee defense, which is pretty damn high for a cavalry. They do also have devastating flanker, so like the Champions, they really want to be doing that, but they're doing okay here against the Blood Knights, and the Blood Knights are going to start wavering, and when they do, it's actually going to give heals to the Pleasure Seekers, which is only really going to seal the deal for them, as it looks like they are going to beat the Blood Knights here. So despite not being anti-large themselves, the Pleasure Seekers putting away a very strong anti-large unit. And the Pleasure Seekers are only a little bit more expensive than the Blood Knights, but still an impressive performance. How about something a little chunkier than the Rot Knights? These are pretty much the same price. They are an anti-large cavalry. Surely the Pleasure Seekers can't stop the Rot Knights. This is a mess of a fight. Tits and pus all over the place. And this fight is actually going pretty damn quick. And the Rot Knights not looking so hot already. This has gone super quickly, even though they've got regeneration as well. I really don't actually understand how the Pleasure Seekers are so damn good. Looking at their stats, they're pretty much the same as the Rot Knights. And the Rot Knights have a bonus versus large. So how the hell are the Pleasure Seekers doing this? Maybe it's their speed is giving them some extra charge damage. I don't know. But they are absolutely murdering everything they seem to touch. But perhaps there is one that can stop them: the French. The Grail Knights, they have magical attacks that'll take away the physical resistance of this demonic unit. Can the Grail Knights get it done? They've done a lot of damage real quick, although they've taken a fair bit as well. It's anybody's guess. It's all to play for. A pretty even fight so far. And this is just the Pleasure Seekers charging into stuff, not even using Devastating Flanker that would double their charge bonus. Can you even imagine? Eventually, one unit of Grail Knights is going to get the Pleasure Seekers wavering. It looks like they're going to get them, but it's pretty much even across the board. Some are winning, some are losing. Who's going to win the majority? It's looking like Pleasure Seekers have won 3 of them, so that's the majority, and they've won them pretty comfortably. Going to win this 4th one as well, so Pleasure Seekers pretty much unstoppable, it seems, and maybe the new best cav in the game? Maybe. Next to a cav that's definitely not the new best cav in the game, the Kurgan Horsemen. These ones of dual weapons, I've got 3 of these and then 3 of the armor-piercing ones as well. Just charging them into Jade Lancers here, a similarly priced cavalry, although a little more expensive, a fair bit more heavy, and as we can see, the Kurgan boys not doing so well, getting crumped pretty bad. And that's because this fight just really isn't for them. Charging into other cavalry is not how you're supposed to use this cavalry. They don't have a lot of armor, they can't take the charge. So we can try them just charging into some infantry, some Empire swordsmen. Let's see how they fare doing that. Well, they do okay. They can rout the Empire swordsmen pretty comfortably, but they are going to take a fair bit of damage themselves in the process, about half of their health gone for both kinds of unit. But these boys do have a Devastating Flanker that'll double their charge bonus, and that's really what they need to use. Here they are charging into the back of some Sargard who are fighting Chaos Marauders. Sargard, generally a tanky, tough holding frontline unit, but when these Kurgan Horsemen hit them in the back with their Devastating Flanker, which is like an 80 charge bonus, those Sargard are going to get melted pretty quickly as the fight wears on, and the Kurgan boys aren't going to take too much damage in return. So the Kurgan cav, quite an interesting one because it's a light cav that's listed as just a cavalry, not a shock cavalry, but they do have a pretty big charge bonus, especially with Devastating Flanker. Still got the low melee defense like a shock cav though, so they're a little confusing, but if you use them in this way, the right way, they can be pretty nasty. Now, I figured Elf Enjoyers would probably hate me more than they already do if I didn't test the Lothan Skycutters in some way. So here, I've got the Lothan Skycutter Bolt Throwers, and we're going to test them out against the regular Eagle Claw Bolt Thrower, which is virtually the same unit, just not in the sky. We'll see if one of them is better at putting out damage or is more accurate than the other. The regular Bolt Thrower does have much more range. The Skycutter's only got the 250, but both do have the option of either an anti-large missile type or an anti-infantry missile type. So what I've done is put the enemy units within about 2/3 of the unit's range so that they get the similar kind of accuracy. So 2/3 of the Lothan Skycutter range, 2/3 of the Eagle Claw range, and we'll see which does more damage and how fast, etc. So Skycutters here, anti-infantry ammo type, firing at these other elves. We can see they do a good bit of damage on their first volley. That's a pretty respectable amount compared to the Eagle Claw, who are not really putting out about as much damage, probably about half as much. But hey, that's just the first volley. Let's see how we go. The second one comes in, taking these elf units down to about 1/4 to 1/3 of their health. Pretty good performance so far, I'd say. It's not far off similar performance, but I think the Eagle Claw is just missing a bit more. It's probably the extra range. Because the Lothan Skycutter is a little bit closer to its target, it's likely going to be more accurate just because it has shorter range. So that shorter range kind of working in its favor, I think. And because, of course, the Skycutter has such good mobility, it can fly around very quickly, it could pretty comfortably get closer than this and just do a lot more damage with a lot more accuracy, depending, of course, on if you're able to do that. If the enemy's got flying units trying to get you, or they're shooting at your Skycutters, or they've got artillery shooting at your Skycutters, you are going to have to be more careful. But otherwise, these Skycutters do seem like a stronger version of the Eagle Claw Bolt Thrower, and they've got that high mobility, so honestly, it feels like they're going to make the Eagle Claw pretty redundant, just because of how valuable it can be to have an artillery piece that can look after itself. And as you can see here, after a few more volleys, the Skycutters nearly got the job done, while the regular Eagle Claw only got the enemy down to half health. So the Skycutters, a very nice addition for all you high elf loving weirdos. Alright, onto some monsters. How about the Praeton for Slaanesh? This is an anti-large armor-piercing monster, and we're going to put it against another armor-piercing but not anti-large monster, the Chimera for Norska. I was going to put them on the ground, but hell, we'll do an air fight. Why not? Some pretty cool fiery animations there, but this one you might think is going to be in favor of the Praeton with its bonus versus large, but the Chimera does have magical attacks, and the Praeton has a physical resistance, which it's not going to get to use with those magical attacks, so this should be a fairly even fight. But it's not. The Praeton gets pretty badly beaten up by the Chimera in all of these fights. And that largely, I think, is going to be down to A, the Praeton losing its physical resistance, but also its slightly lower melee defense. They both do poison damage, so they're doing that to each other and cancelling it out. I did, out of interest, try the Praeton against a non-magical monster, the new one from the High Elves, the Merworm. I wondered if maybe its bonus versus large would help here more, and maybe it would do more if it could keep its physical resistance, and well, yeah, that wasn't the case against this big thing, because it is just a massive, expensive monster. It's got a ton of health, so the Praeton didn't really stand much chance here. I did also try it out against the Cathay Sentinel, which is just really good at beating up monsters, even though it probably shouldn't be. Doesn't have a bonus versus large, but it's going to become the benchmark for seeing how good a monster is. If it can beat the Sentinel, it's a pretty good sign. And it did manage to beat one of the Sentinels. All the other ones lost by a fair margin. So a bit of an anomaly that this one won somehow. In fact, this one actually died at the same time as killing its Sentinels. So what's going on here? Is the Praeton just rubbish, or does it just suck at killing monsters? Well, I did one more test, this time against Cavalry, Dragon Princes here. I wondered if maybe single entity monsters are just the wrong kind of target for the Praeton. Because you see, it has this ability, All-Consuming Hatred, which will lower its melee defense by 24, making it very easy for the enemy to hit, but it'll give back 28 damage reflection for every hit it takes. And that's something that is only useful in this kind of situation when it's surrounded, getting constantly stabbed by enemies. So against cavalry, against infantry, against even monstrous infantry, this will be useful, but against single entities, it's literally useless and is only going to serve to get you killed. I didn't use that ability against the monsters, but I'm using it here against the cavalry. This is the second time I'm getting to use it here, and as you can see, the Praeton is beating these Dragon Princes with a bit of health left, so it can still do some work after. Some of them got nearly half health, but yeah, this is how the Praeton is supposed to be used, going after things that can surround it and hit it when it's using that ability. It may even want to fly away while that ability's on cooldown, and then come back to use it again, because obviously here I was just leaving it in prolonged combat, which probably didn't do it any favors. But yes, again, like the Kurgan Horseman, only if you use it correctly. Stay away from the single entities. Our last couple of tests in the monster department then. How about the Chimera against the new Sea Elemental? This thing is kind of different, much like the Oceanids. It has a lot of melee defense, which is kind of rare for a monster. 70 melee defense is pretty huge. Doesn't have any armor though, because, you know, it's water. Relies on a 30% physical resistance, which the Chimera is going to take away with its magical attack, so this could be an interesting one. Although, in fact, I've actually only just realized that the Chimera has fire attacks and the Sea Elemental has fire resistance. So that's actually going to come into play here as well. And if that's a 20 or 30% fire resistance, it's going to be reducing the Chimera's damage by that much, which could be pretty damn huge. And it looks like that's the case here, because the Sea Elemental has barely taken any damage at all in some of these fights. So Sea Elemental looking pretty strong, Chimera getting a slap down. But largely I think that's because of the interaction of the abilities here. It made it a bit of a mismatch for the Chimera. Otherwise I think it does do pretty well against monsters. But let's give the Sea Elemental the benchmark test then against the Sentinel. And well, this fight took a while and was pretty even across the board. The Sea Elemental was winning some, the Sentinel was winning some. One significant advantage for the Sea Elemental though is when it gets below 25% health, it will spawn up a unit of Oceanids. And those are going to help out in this fight. And by the end of it, it is going to be pretty damn close. One Sentinel has won here. This fight, a pretty close one, could go either way. An Elemental win here and two dead Sentinels over there with one Sea Elemental, so I guess one fight was a draw. But overall, I think it'd be fair to call this a draw. It's pretty even across. Well, let's see who wins this one, actually. This is the final fight. Let's see who can do it. Okay, there we go. Sentinel's dead. Sea Elemental takes the win, and I think it's fair to say the Sea Elemental was slightly better than the Sentinel there, so a very good monster, good at taking on other single entities, good at slapping infantry, no doubt. There's a horse. What the fuck? I genuinely haven't seen that before. Even when I was doing this fight, I've never... Did he eat the horse? Where's the horse? Oh, what am I, the girl from Jurassic Park? Where's the goat? Alright, anyway. How about the new Cursed Etin for Norska? This is basically a giant with a couple of buffs, one when it's above 50% health, one when it's below 50% health. The first one does give it some speed, charge bonus, unyielding assault, glorious charge, so it's actually pretty quick for a giant at 45 speed, nice slapping, but largely stats-wise, the Etin actually isn't too much different from the regular old Norscan giant we've had before. The only difference is those two abilities, which do give it a little bit of an interesting take, but otherwise it's mostly the same thing here. The Merworm, of course, just a big tanky unit. It's got a lot of health, does have a bonus versus large, so a bit of an advantage in this fight. It's currently slapping the giant around the face, although the giant returning the favor. But regeneration on the side of the Merworm is definitely going to help it a lot, because this fight isn't going to go too quickly and that regeneration is going to stack up. So I doubt the Etin is going to be able to do it here, but it's giving it back. It's doing some good damage by all means. And by the end of it, that is how it's going to look. Pretty close in some of these fights though. The Etin nearly getting the Merworm in a couple of cases, but the Merworm's hanging on. A couple of them have got half health, so they've murdered them. One's actually been killed over there, the Etin. But yeah, a pretty close fight, but the Merworm taking the victory. But there's only one proper test you can give to a Merworm here, and that's going to be against a Dreadsaurian, of course, the only other monster similar in size. It might actually... is it bigger? Maybe it's about the same. But either way, if you had this fight going on in the middle of your battle, it would be a pretty crazy sight. And it seems like the Dreadsaurian getting the better of the Merworm so far. We'll see if the regeneration comes into play, because the Dreadsaurian doesn't have that. Also, the bonus versus large advantage for the Merworm, that might help him out a little bit. But equally, the Dreadsaurian does have the ranged attack and the poison, so it's probably evening out quite a bit. Watching some of these big single entities fight, I feel like the animations are looking a bit better, like they actually react when they hit each other a bit more. Because sometimes they just twat each other and the other one just doesn't react, even though they do take damage. So I'm not sure, maybe it's been improved in this patch, or maybe I've just not really noticed before. But whatever the case, the Dreadsaurian, still the king of the jungle, as the Merworm is going to take a pounding and lose pretty badly, as the Dreadsaurian still has about half of its health. But the Merworm, a decent contestant, and no doubt a big dangerous damage-soaked unit for the High Elves. Alright, let's finish up with a few duels between some of the melee characters. Dakala versus Bjorg, Bearstruck first of all. Dakala, largely a straight-up damage dealer, whereas Bjorg is more of a tank, although he can still dish out some damage. He also has a bonus versus large, which is going to help him here against Dakala, and Dakala has a bonus versus infantry, which isn't going to help her against Big Boy. But you may notice here the Elixir of Damnation removes 100% melee attack for whoever Dakala attacks. Assumedly, that just stops base melee attack, so doesn't affect things like extra melee attack from Frenzy. But while she was using that, I had Bjorg using his 40% damage resistance, so a bit of interplay going on between all the abilities and such. Now, Dakala kind of has 3 different stances you can choose. Here I'm using the one that boosts her melee defense by 50%, but reduces her melee attack by 50%. So now she's a bit more tanky and a bit more defensive. Bearstruck winning the fight, though. As you can see, this fight's going on a fair while, by the way. Elixir of Damnation and the damage resistance come back round again. But it looks like Bearstruck is going to do it in this one. I'm not sure if maybe I could have won this if I used the stances better. Maybe I should have just gone all in on damage for Dakala and given her the damage boost. It does reduce her melee defense by like 50%. Though, so it's pretty risky. But Bearstruck, an absolute beefcake, able to outdo Dakala here. But let's give them both the real test against the best. Can they beat Grimgor? If they can, or if they can come close, it's fair to say they're a pretty decent melee lord. Again, trying to use all the abilities for both sides as optimally as possible to keep it as fair as possible. Although with Dakala, I'm not really sure what's the optimal stance to use. Should I use the more damage dealing one? Should I use the more defensive one? And there's actually kind of 2 more defensive ones, so it's like, which one should I use? So I'm trying my best to figure it out, but we'll see how we go. One thing that is in Dakala's favor is that she has a bonus versus infantry, and believe it or not, Grimgor counts as infantry and is a small entity, not a large one. So that bonus is going to come into play and help her out here. But Grimgor, with his 89 melee attack and 750 weapon strength, is, well, I'm not sure how much that bonus versus infantry is really going to help. But one little synergy I may have missed here while doing this fight, you see I've used the Elixir of Damnation, so 0 melee attack for Grimgor. What I should have done here now is switch Dakala to an offensive stance, boosting her damage but reducing her melee defense, because that would be fine when Grimgor's on 0 melee attack, right? And then when that rolls off and he's got his melee attack back, then I'll switch to one of the more defensive stances again. I could have done that, maybe would have given her a little bit of a damage boost and maybe would have helped her here. It is a very close fight, and unfortunately she can't quite beat Grimgor here, but maybe she could, so she can definitely hang with the best of them if she can hang with Grimboy. Same test then, this time for Bearstruck. Let's see if he can take down the big man. Bearstruck's bonus versus large, not going to help him here because, of course, Grimgor's only small. But we'll see if Bjorg's got the tankiness to withstand Grimgor. Oh! He slapped him down. You don't see people do that to Grimgor very often. Grimgor, absolutely furious, drops a little blood armor. But Bjorg, heavily debuffed by the Your Next ability, taking away his melee defense, and Grimgor's stats are just absolutely nuts when his buffs are going. But I guess Bearstruck, his health doesn't seem to really be going anywhere in a hurry, so he's hanging in there. But as this fight starts to wear on, Bjorg's health is running down, his regeneration is running out, and with another Your Next just being dropped on him, it's not looking good for him. And by the end of it, he only manages to get Grimgor down to about half health, so it just goes to show how well Dakala did. But Bearstruck absolutely tanking out so much of this damage from Grimgor. There's no doubt he is the toughest of the tanky boys. Feels like a Gorok level of toughness, but damage output, not so much his bag. But there we go, a bunch of the units from the Tides of Torment. I didn't test Aisling or anything like that because he's not that much of a melee hero. He doesn't have armor-piercing damage unless you put him on a Star Dragon, then it's mostly the dragon doing the fighting. And obviously, Sail is a wizard, so he's just going to get crumped in this kind of fight. But there we go, I hope you've enjoyed this. Thanks for watching. Here's some more Tides of Torment related stuff. If you're interested, do consider supporting the channel through Patreon or YouTube memberships if you wish. Otherwise, I will see you in the future.